Hello everyone, I'm JG and welcome back to Music Forever, where today I'm going to be reviewing the newest album from Harry Styles, Fine Line. This is Harry's second studio album on his own. I first got into his music with the release of his debut project back in 2017, which I thought was a pretty enjoyable record. Not one of my favorites of 2017 necessarily, but still a really solid and enjoyable project, and I saw a lot of potential in it too, so I was interested to see where he was going to go following the release of that record. And here on his second full-length release, I do feel like he has improved in some ways as an artist on this album. Maybe not quite to the extent that I was hoping for, but I do still think that this album ends up being really enjoyable from start to finish for the most part, and I do think, once again, that his skills as an artist have improved somewhat since his debut album. One thing that I was very happy to hear on this album is that it seems like Harry's going for a more cohesive album experience here on this thing compared to his debut record. Not that the album wasn't cohesive or anything quite like that, but this new album here just feels a bit more well structured in my opinion. I feel like the flow from track to track is a bit more exciting. I feel like there's a lot more diversity here on this thing when it comes to the different sounds and styles being explored, but at the same time it comes together into a nice album package. And I like on this thing how lyrically he's also talking about some pretty consistent stuff too, most notably a breakup throughout the lyrics here, but of course he dives into a variety of different subtopics relating to this breakup, whether it be happy memories or of course the sadness that comes along with that breakup, and then acceptance, moving on, things of that sort. Overall, I just feel like the packaging here of this record it feels a lot more tight and compact compared to his debut project. It feels a lot more focused in a way I was really hoping to see. The album starts off pretty strongly with the opening song Golden, which if you've watched any of my videos before, particularly all the way through to the end, you may have noticed that I always end off my videos with the expression stay golden. I'm not sure if any of you actually watch my videos all the way through, or if any of you actually even watch my videos at all, but that is something that I do. And I was happy to see here on this opening track that Harry is kind of embracing the Stay Golden ideology here on this song. This is such a Music Forever anthem, this track, but in all seriousness, I think this is a really enjoyable opening cut. It's one of the catchier songs on the record, and it captures a nice, happier feeling on this project that I think Harry pulls off pretty nicely. Overall, just a really fun, enjoyable opener to this album. The album then moves into Watermelon Sugar, another one of the more fun, upbeat cuts on this thing. Again, this song has a really loud, brash, catchy hook to it that I found myself really enjoying. It's just overall a pretty fun pop song, and again, it adds to a pretty strong start to this project as a whole. However, immediately following this track, I feel like the next few songs or so in the track listing are some of the weakest on the album. Not to say that they're bad necessarily, I think all the tracks are pretty enjoyable to some extent, but Adore You and Lights Up, they're pretty enjoyable tracks. I'm not super crazy about either of them, but they serve their purpose fairly enough. I think they're catchy songs. They fit within the context of the record. They're just not the most interesting overall, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And Cherry is probably my least favorite song on the record as a whole, just probably the most forgettable on this thing too. Again, not a terrible track by any means, it's pretty listenable, and again, it fits in pretty nicely with the sound, aesthetic, and concept of the rest of this album. It's just not a song that I was super interested in. However, immediately after this track, the album kind of kicks back up again and starts with some more really enjoyable cuts. The song Falling is a pretty slow, sad ballad song where Harry's talking about kind of changing as a person and to some extent being afraid of this person who he may have already changed into or he may change into in the future. I feel like his vocal performance here on this track is one of the strongest on the entire record, and again, this is another catchy track even though it is slower and certainly a lot sadder compared to some of the songs I mentioned earlier that were also pretty catchy. The song She is another moment on the record that really surprised me in a pleasant way. It's a bit of a lengthier song by Harry's standards, but I feel like he pulls it off really nicely with everything that comes together here on this track. Again, the hook to this thing is really catchy. I feel like his vocal performance here on this song is one of the best on the record. And the guitar parts here on this track are fantastic too, especially the solo that pops up on this thing. This whole song kind of feels like a throwback to like maybe a bit of a slower, tenser rock song of days past, but in a way that still feels kind of not necessarily new, but not necessarily old or dated either. It feels distinctly his own, but at the same time it's clearly influenced by things of the past too. But I feel like the way he pulls it off here on this song is just really enjoyable. Again, the hook here to this track is fantastic. I love the emotion on display here in this song. And again, I gotta shout out the guitar work here on this thing, some of the best on the entire record. Speaking of lengthier cuts on this thing, the closing track to this thing, Fine Line, the title track, is another moment on the record where Harry decides to get a bit more out there with his sound and experiment a bit more with a bit of a lengthier composition. And for the most part, while I don't think this song works out quite as nicely as She, or even something like Sign of the Times, for example, from his debut project when it comes to lengthier songs, I still think this is a really solid closer to the record that, again, just features some really solid instrumentation and some really great vocal performances from Harry. While I enjoy the majority of the songs that come towards the end of this project, the track Treat People with Kindness is one of my least favorite on the record. In fact, this actually might be my least favorite song instead of Cherry. Little mistake there earlier in the video. I forgot this song existed, actually. But yeah, not that I hate this song either necessarily. It's just a bit too kind of cheerful and upbeat in a very simplistic and straightforward way for me to really get behind. I don't know, it just sounds kind of cheesy to me. I mean, I can see what he's going for here on this song, kind of this really upbeat, hopeful, and just through and through really happy sounding track that is supposed to just make you feel really happy when you listen to it. But I don't know, it comes across maybe a little too forced in my opinion, for me to really get behind fully. Not a terrible song. Again, I feel like his vocal performance here on this track is still pretty solid, and thematically it still does fit in with some of the ideas present on the rest of the project. It's just not my favorite song on the album. On this album, you can still hear that Harry is clearly inspired by the poppy, soft rock of decades past, as that's still really the style of music that he's exploring here on this album, much like on his debut. However, I do feel like on this thing, he has a better command over this sound, that with the experimentation that he does do with it here on this thing fits in a lot better with a lot of the other sounds on this thing. Like I said before, She's an example of this with its really cool guitar parts, or even a track like Watermelon Sugar with some of its kind of odder, sounds and instrumentation. I feel like the whole sound of this record is one that's really consistent, even though Harry takes a few more risks on this thing overall compared to his debut. Another smaller complaint that I do have with this record is that the production and mixing here isn't, the best that it could be, I feel. Not necessarily in a way where it's kind of trying to be like rough around the edges intentionally. I just feel like there's some parts here where the mixing just isn't the greatest. It's never terrible or anything, but at the same time I do feel like it could be a little bit better. But even still, despite that fact, I feel like this album overall is one that is pretty enjoyable. I don't think quality-wise that it's super different from his debut project, but I do feel like he does step some things up here on this thing, most notably when it comes to the cohesiveness of this thing compared to his debut. And I am happy to see that he has continued to grow and just develop as an artist here on this new album. So if you're a fan of the debut record from Harry, I would definitely give this a listen. Overall, I would say that this is a little bit better, but for the most part, they are pretty equal in terms of quality. But yeah, this is just a pretty solid pop rock album through and through. Even though I do have some minor complaints with it, these really don't get in the way of my enjoyment of this thing all too much. But yeah, with that said, that is just my own personal opinion on this project. If you happen to disagree, that's perfectly fine. In fact, feel free to drop your own thoughts on this album in the comment section down below. And while you're down there, make sure to also leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel for more music-related content, things like album reviews, track reviews, things of that sort. Again, thank you for watching, and stay golden.